So this week, I'm speaking on a panel for GTLA that is titled Practicing While Black. And essentially, we're going to be breaking down what it means to practice while black and some of the issues and the racial issues that we have to deal with in the legal community and how that affects us even outside of the legal realm. This week's video is going to show a few of the highlights or clips from this panel. Check it out. That the majority of my clients are African American. I've obviously had white clients in the past, but when I do have to interview with those particular clients, I feel like I'm having to almost overprove my qualifications for them to deem me competent and that I can represent them in my cases. And so, yeah, I feel that way, and that I'm having to go to AAJ events, I'm having to go to GTLA, I'm having to go to Gate City Bar so that I'm out there and that people can see that I'm out in the community and that I'm actually trying to, handle cases on behalf of my community as well. Because I think this is important, because we all kind of agree that systemic racism exists, but unfortunately, I think out there in the community as well, a lot of people who don't experience it don't believe that it continues to exist in our society. In fact, one of Trump's economic advisors a few weeks ago stated that systemic racism no longer exists. And so I think what we also need to do as advocates, not only in the courtroom, but in our communities and our white allies as well, we need to have these hard conversations with our family members, with our friends, so that they understand that this continues to be an issue in our society. And really, I think there's no better example that we can think of is within our own practices in personal injury, in insurance defense. When we're evaluating these claims, what do we do? And a lot of us were former insurance defense lawyers. We look at the race of the plaintiff. We look at the race of the defendant. We look at the venue. Is this going to be an all-white jury or is this going to be an all-black jury? Well, why do we do that? Is that just some coincidence, or is it because of some larger issue that we know exists that we don't speak about and that insurance adjusters know exists, and why they tend to value black claims less than white claims if the plaintiff is white? And so I just think we have to continue to have these honest conversations and, like I said, be advocates not only in the courtrooms but in our communities as well. Especially in the counties that you mentioned, DeKalb, Clayton, Muskogee County, it's probably smart to at least talk to or potentially associate with a black lawyer on these types of trials. But what also is important is that tokenism will not work. And this is something that we talk a lot about amongst ourselves as black lawyers, and I've seen it happen all of the time. I remember I was trying a case in DeKalb County with Michael Goldberg against some very good defense lawyers. And as soon as we started trying the case, they brought in a black associate who had never been on the case. And I whispered to Michael, I said, if they don't allow that lawyer to have some substantive role in the case, it's gonna backfire on them. And lo and behold, throughout the trial, the lawyer didn't say anything except passing papers to the head lawyers. And and we got a pretty big verdict in that case. And when I spoke to the jurors afterwards, who were mostly African American, they weren't happy about that. They spoke out about that. I didn't even have to bring it up. And so again, I think it's important that if you're going to do this, if you're going to bring in black lawyers, if you're going to associate black lawyers, you need to give them substantive roles in that case or in that trial as well. If you get a referral, do you want to bring in another lawyer to further cut that fee? So I can understand that from a business perspective. I think when you have situations where you have unattached cases where they're direct in, and you know that a black or Hispanic attorney can be of benefit and that you're going to give them substantive work to do in that case, I think we just need to take more advantage of those opportunities. Like I said, I've worked at a lot of firms. I see it go kind of one way where they come in, but I don't necessarily see it happen the other way that we're talking about here on this panel. And I think that needs to happen more. Just lastly, to piggyback off of what Madeline said, regarding continuing to discuss these issues, this cannot be just a one-time discussion. we need to be having these conversations at least annually within GTLA, and then taking what we learn back out into our community so that we can continue to have these conversations. That's equally as important. So one thing that was touched on during the panel is that we need to continue to have this dialogue and this honest and candid dialogue if we're going to really affect change. And so within your organizations, within your companies that you work at, make sure these conversations are being had. Is the leadership having panels where we can talk about race, where we can talk about microaggressions? If they're not, you might want to stand up and be courageous and say something about that to make sure that your company does that. If they're not willing to do that, then that's a pretty big red flag that they're not really interested in dealing with these issues head on. So let's make sure we continue to have these conversations in our communities with our white allies, and so they have these conversations with their family and their friends as well, so we really can affect some change.